Hey, Kevin here, Skylabs, bringing you another video. Definitely gonna be a fun one. I'm pretty excited about this one. I'm going to respond to some of the questions that were submitted this last week, and there's some really good ones. There are quite a few I wish I had time to get to because I kind of got a feeling this video is going to run a little on the lengthy side. A couple of these topics I would have liked to have discussed further in length than maybe a top 5 video or something like that. And this seems the right place to kind of do more of a deep dive. So if you don't mind me blabbing a little bit and maybe not having as much visual candy of silver face receivers and turntables flashing on the screen, sit back, grab yourself a beverage, and I'm going to answer some of these questions. Some of these are really good. I'd like to get to more, but I don't think I'm going to be able to. But I will keep these lists of questions, and I will definitely do a follow-up video because there are some really good questions here. Do you think hi-fi today is built to the same standard as the old days? I mean, 30 years from now, will any of today's stuff be working or sought after? And then he mentions how, DAC and streaming tech changes daily, it seems. He just misses the old days when equipment was equipment. And I think there are a couple key things here. One would be, are we talking about consumer grade electronics? There's price point that's involved here. And then also what piece of equipment are we talking about? I mean, I agree definitely with DACs and streaming. That stuff is going to be disposable just because, technology changes so fast. But as far as amplification, speakers, and turntable technology goes, why they've made obviously improvements, I don't think they're as large as new tech like DACs and streaming and stuff like that. So, but getting back to consumer grade, there's the key in my opinion, because what we as a vintage audio community, what we are hunting down and buying is consumer grade gear. And do I think consumer grade gear from now is going to be repairable or have value or anything like that? Absolutely not. And what I mean by consumer grade gear is stuff you'd buy at Best Buy or on Amazon. I'm not talking about PS Audio and Macintosh and the good stuff that's still being made like the vintage equipment was. And in that situation, no, they don't even compete, in my opinion. I think the vintage equipment, being most of it is Class A, B, you've got 40 pounds of transformer and capacitors and resistors and everything else dedicated to 2-channel audio, where, today's consumer 2-channel stereo more looks like a computer on the inside, and it's filled with IC chips and Class D amplifiers, and it's just completely different. It doesn't sound as good. It has no soul to it, in my opinion. It sounds hollow. But you have to look at it like today's consumer electronics are still cheaper than the vintage electronics were without inflation involved. So I understand why it doesn't sound as good, and it doesn't look as good, and it doesn't have soul. It's because it doesn't cost anything. It's cheap, disposable, throwaway stuff after 4 or 5 years, and that's it. Vintage electronics that were built in the 70s, I don't need to tell you, you're watching this channel. It's amazing for the price, for its reliability. It's 50 years old, 40 years old, and it's still relevant and viable and sounds great today when they're working properly. And the other key to this question is, once again, which component are we talking about? Because right now speakers are where the bargain is happening in vintage audio. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're large and they're hard to ship. So they're still being sold locally, which if you're in a smaller community, you're going to be able to get really good vintage speakers somewhat cheap because there's not as many buyers. Whereas amplifiers, receivers, and turntables, which I hate to say it, they are shippable. Most people don't ship them correctly, obviously, but because they are shippable, it opens up the demand because anybody in the world can have a vintage amplifier or receiver shipped to them from anywhere in the world. You're not going to do that with a pair of Pioneer HPM 100s. So I think it depends on the components as well. As far as turntables go, there's a lot to be said for a brand new tone arm, a brand new gimbal, a brand new motor, a brand new bearing. I love vintage electronics. There's no question. But turntables are different than speakers and receivers, and there are moving parts on a turntable that need to be very accurate and very precise. And so with the turntables, it really is kind of hard to compete with a brand new turntable with no wear and tear on those really intricate, delicate parts that need to be precise. So I have both. I have vintage turntables and new turntables, and I love them both for different reasons. But with turntables, I do think the newer ones probably have an upper leg because of the fact that they're brand new. And I've got some great news, and that is we are now selling new vinyl records at skylabsaudio.com/shop. We are starting off with just 20 or so of the classics, stuff from Black Sabbath, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin. And for those of you out there that have maybe been soured by ordering new vinyl records online because when you received the record, it had dented corners or was damaged because of a cheap mailer, we are only using premium record mailers. To us, it is worth the extra money to make sure you get your record with a nice jacket and not damaged. So head over to skylabsaudio.com/shop and see if there's a record that maybe you've been needing to upgrade for a while to a brand new copy. Thank you. Could you please mention how equipment sounds compared to other equipment? I know you explained the reasons why you don't on your videos, but honestly, isn't half the reason people look at audio equipment videos in the first place? You make some solid points as to why not, but it also sounds like you hold back because of what people may say. I say, who cares? Feels like half the story is left untold. You have a wealth of information and experience. Your channel, along with others, are helping this hobby tremendously. Thanks for your time. I appreciate that. I really do. And I really appreciate this question because this is one of those questions that, you know, I would like to be able to explain myself further, but when we're in the middle of a, you know, top 5 video or, you know, a favorite receivers list, it's hard to go into something this in depth and retain the majority of the audience's attention. And then I agree with you. It is half the story, honestly. But the reason I've given that I think you're referring to is that all of the amplifiers and receivers are over 40 years old that we talk about for the most part, and that they're all in different states of condition. That is an issue when talking about these, because if I were to say, well, this receiver sounds incredible, it's got great bass, nice and fast, it's maybe peppery, and then somebody goes and picks one up and they feel like it's sluggish and the bass is not really that responsive, it sounds dull. That's a completely different thing than what I heard. That aspect of vintage audio really makes it difficult to give your analysis on it because we don't have 20 carbon copies. They're not being produced and sent off the manufacturer's line brand new with brand new components and they all sound the same. That's just not the reality of it. That's the reason I've given in previous videos in almost kind of a short form. And I definitely do agree that is an issue. Well, there's 3 points in this question, but I want to address another one where you say, but honestly, isn't the reason people look at audio equipment videos in the first place is to get a representation of what they sound like. And personally, I don't go to videos for people's opinion on how things sound. I don't read magazines for articles on how things sound. For those people that publish those kind of things or make these videos, a lot of times, you know, it's for money. And the other thing, are they reviewers or are they journalists? You know, there's two things there too. I think in a way, I just don't put a lot of stock into somebody that's making money off of giving their opinion on a piece of sound equipment. And I appreciate you wanting mine. That shows your trust in me, and I really appreciate that. That's not something that a lot of people get. So don't think I'm not acknowledging the fact that you trust my opinion on how something sounds. It's greatly appreciated. However, I don't want to jeopardize that or take advantage of that by making up something that I think you might want to hear, or that maybe I'm not able to tell the difference with, at least with receivers and turntables, which are very nuanced in differences. And the problem is, I do not have a controlled listening space. I graduated with a degree in recording engineering in 2000, and I spent a lot of time in very expensive controlled audio environments, listening to details and focusing on everything that hit my ears for hours and hours a day. And I do think for me to give my opinion on something so subjective as audio equipment and how it sounds, I would want that environment first. This room right here I'm in a basement with a drain, a floor drain, concrete floors. This is essentially a facade. I mean, it's hooked up. I listen to music a lot when I'm getting set up and stuff like that, but this room sounds terrible. It's awful. And the shop is no better. You know, we've got a noisy HVAC system over there. There's a lot of electronics, a lot of test equipment, all plugged in at the same time, generating noise. You can get an idea of what something sounds like, but as far as listening for nuanced differences between two receivers or getting a really good idea of how something sounds, it's just not there. And I really do hope Skylabs grows to where a actual controlled listening room is a possibility. That is a huge goal of mine, would be to have a dedicated listening room in order to be able to do more in-depth evaluation of how some of these pieces sound. We are working towards that. But as of right now, I'm not going to listen to a Pioneer 780 in a really suboptimal room and try and give you my impressions of the nuanced differences between that and a Pioneer 535. As I really do think, unless you are in a tuned, controlled room, I don't think you'll be able to pick up on the differences. I don't think I'll be able to pick up on the differences. And I consider myself, honestly, to have a very good ear. I am one of those people, and this is not a brag, but I am one of those people that will have a conversation with somebody, stop dead in the tracks, and I'll say either, did you hear that? Or what was that sound? Or, oh, I love this song. And I'll look back and I'll see a blank look on their face, even after the conversation is stopped, because they either don't hear the song that's playing or they don't realize there's a distortion or vibration on a speaker that's across the room. But spending all that time focusing on what I'm hearing, it trains your brain to pick up micro nuance differences or problems that are happening around you audibly. And so I hope at some point we do have the room to be able to do more type of comparison and deeper audio reviews of some of this equipment. I would love that. It's just not there right now. I definitely appreciate you asking this question. I hope that sums it up a little bit more. I do appreciate you wanting to know my opinion, and I would love to give you my opinion. I just don't have the environment that I think is needed to really give you my opinion and stand behind it. That's all. The basics: pairing vintage receiver with new or vintage speakers, pairing output watts with power handling capacity. Okay, there's several questions here. Let's see which one we get the most often. We get this question all the time where we get people that will come in and they'll say, okay, I've got a 50 watt per channel amplifier. I need a speaker that can handle 50 watts. Or my speakers are rated at 200 watts. I need a 200 watt per channel receiver. I think wattage ratings on the back of speakers is one of the most worthless metrics or specs you could look at when buying speakers. Efficiency is key, and the ohms is key. I usually rebuttal this question with, what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve with matching up wattage to wattage? Do you plan on listening to 50 watts of output per channel from a receiver going to your speakers without a helmet on and isolation headphones? Because unless you are, what does it matter? And I'm generalizing here, but I'm talking people that are coming in, buying their first stereo, and they're overly concerned matching wattage to the amplifier. And it's really just not important, at least at this stage. In my opinion, unless you're trying to achieve really high SPLs or sound pressure levels, the wattage rating on a pair of speakers doesn't matter. I'd be more concerned with efficiency than I would the wattage rating. Even more so, just for a quick example, because I just thought of this. To show you how silly that wattage rating is, the first HPM 100s were rated at 100 watts from Pioneer. The mid 70s to late 70s Pioneer HPM 100s, they were rated at 100 watts. And they were made for several years, and Pioneer made a bigger and badder amplifier, i.e., the 1280, the 1980, and customers were coming in saying, I need a speaker that's rated at a high enough wattage for this amplifier. And it put Pioneer in a bad spot to where they said, well, you know what we'll do? We'll make a 200 watt version, except we're going to keep the same speakers, the same crossover network, and the cabinet is all going to be the same, except we're going to paint the ring that goes on the port, and then we're going to change the sticker on the back to say 200 watts. And that's what they did. And it gave customers peace of mind knowing that, well, my speakers can handle the amount of power I'm going to put to them. It's the same speaker as the 100 watt rated HPM 100s from prior. It's got a different sticker and it's got a painted port beauty ring on it. I know this for a fact because I've actually had both sets of speakers disassembled at the same time. And those are the exact same speaker drivers that are in both. There is no difference. So it's just not anything I would spend a lot of time worrying about. The basics, sometimes the basics are the most in-depth questions to answer. That's just kind of a broad generalization. If you really want to deep dive and understand the basics, Paul McGowan has a YouTube channel from PS Audio that really breaks these little topics down into bite-sized nuggets. And I've watched a ton of his videos because the guy is, he knows so much. He's been an audio designer for his whole life. I definitely think if you're wanting to learn the basics, I think Paul McGowan's probably already covered it in a video. I'm just giving you a generalization, and my best advice would be I would not worry about the way a manufacturer rates the wattage of their speakers. That number means nothing to me. So just my opinion. Know your goals. Know what you're trying to achieve, because there are other specs that will help you achieve those besides watts. Thank you very much for the questions. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. It was for me. And hopefully you got something out of it. I'll keep that community post going, and I'll check back to it from time to time and do one of these quick videos. So really appreciate it. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks.